My fishing adventure. A true story. Well, some of it. Okay, just a little bit of it. You just decide for yourself. It had been a long day, and Gary Damaris was ready to hit the sack. As usual, he was looking forward to his favorite bedtime activity, reading his fishing catalog. Although he rarely caught anything, Gary was hooked on fishing. If he could only learn to land that big one at Bunks Territory, Lake Kitchie, Minnesota. Certainly Gary, at his ripe old age, was no longer a child. However, Paul Trommer and Paul Fisher suspect that deep down, he would always be a kid at heart when it came to fishing. Fortunately for Gary, nobody knew Bobber Bear was his hero. He carried his bear with him on every fishing trip. Being a real snoozer, Gary began to doze off. He started to dream he had become Bobber Bear. This was the most exciting dream he had ever had in his whole life. Shane Flint, his fishing pal, was also transformed into a bear. Now, to most of us, being transformed into a bear might be cause for a little concern, but Gary was excited about it. After all, bears, unlike himself, often catch fish. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, Gary and Shane Flint hurriedly entered a local fishing tournament. Maybe this time they would win something. Gary and Shane Flint checked out sinkers, flies, hooks, floats, and anything else they might need for the fishing contest at the Best Little Lure House. They also found time to pick up a few munchies and cold beverages. Gary didn't have enough pocket change to buy the new boat he admired. You'd think anything was possible in a dream. Next, Gary and Shane Flint decided a visit to a fish aquarium would be beneficial. Last year, after being skunked at the tournament, Gary had bought a rather large fish to fool Paul Trommer and Paul Fisher. Embarrassingly, though, the fish he had purchased wasn't even local to the area. Gary's credibility as a fishing wizard went right down the drain. Before they knew it, they were at their favorite fishing hole, Bunks Territory, Lake Kitchie, Minnesota. Gary and Shane Flint opened their cold beverages and started some serious fishing. As usual, the bites were incredible. Unfortunately, only mosquitoes and flies enjoyed the action. Several hours and beverages later, Gary and Shane Flint were getting discouraged. Despite being fishing bears, they still weren't catching any fish. "Phew, it sure seems hot today," exclaimed Gary. "I'm sure I've had too much sun." He opened yet another beverage. After trying all their other lures, they decided to switch to worms. Worms wiggled so much, and because Gary was also a klutz, he often hooked himself, not the worm. Mercifully, Shane Flint agreed to bait his hook. "We've got to catch something," they both agreed. "Otherwise, we'll have to listen to all that ridicule from Paul Trommer and Paul Fisher again this year." Gary prided himself on being a skilled angler. There was nothing he couldn't do with a rod and line. However, today his coordination seemed to be a bit off. This was just more proof he had already had too much sun. After losing more than a few worms, sinkers, and hooks, Gary was finally successful. "Looks like a fish, only smaller," quipped Shane Flint. "Well, at least I caught something that was alive," retorted Gary. "I can't wait to show Paul Trommer and Paul Fisher the 20-pound boot you hooked." Gary and Shane Flint had been fishing for hours, and they had only caught that one small fish. "I can't believe this," complained Gary. "I thought bears always caught lots of fish." "Why don't you just wind in your line and let's eat our lunch?" Shane Flint asked. "Then we can go home." "I can't now," grumbled Gary. "I think I'm snagged again." Suddenly, there was a big jerk on the end of Gary's line. No, it wasn't Shane Flint. "Look," Gary shouted as he grabbed his rod. Both Gary and Shane Flint were absolutely amazed when this humongous fish jumped out of the water. Now, Gary and Shane Flint knew the sun must be really affecting them. They imagined this fish was so big it started pulling their boat. Of course, never having caught a big fish before, they thought it wasn't hard for their imaginations to play such a trick on them. However, they were going so fast, Shane Flint had to hold on to keep from flying out of the boat along with everything else. As the story goes, the boat went faster and faster. Furthermore, it was claimed that the fishermen came from miles around to witness this incredible event. Gary clearly remembered Paul Traumer and Paul Fisher cheering, or were they jeering, from the shore. "I'm going to catch this fish and win the trophy even if it takes me all night," declared a determined Gary. To everyone's surprise, especially Paul Traumer and Paul Fisher, Gary somehow managed to land the fish. Even more unbelievable, he was proclaimed the winner of the fishing tournament. "Gary, wake up," Shane Flint said, shaking Gary out of his dream. "I just entered us into a fishing tournament. Let's go now or we'll be late." Gary had only one question: where can I rent a bear outfit?